The space race, what is it? We're returning to the moon. They went in 69 with 2 junk pieces, but we can't return in 2025. Imagine, if you do a show with Calleja and a flat earther, are they going to space? Wouldn't that be awesome? It's still in science books and on Wikipedia. When shown evidence of a spherical Earth, people still claim the main proof is ships disappearing over the horizon. A Greek supposedly saw that and deduced, of course it's doing this. When he saw the ship vanish from view at Alexandria's port, he said it was hidden geometrically.
To see it clearly, the curvature of the Earth, you would have to fly much higher, maybe above 15,000 meters.
If Earth's curvature is barely visible at 10 kilometers high, what did the Greeks or ships actually see? Notice that in that famous speech Kennedy gave a couple of weeks before he was assassinated, he says in that speech that the system has a great military, economic, political, and scientific machinery.
He says it openly. The United States is battling forces that operate in the shadows.
Exactly, even if the Earth is flat, you can still travel around the world if you want. The Vatican hired the best artists then, since Hollywood didn't exist. But people had to be convinced that there was an angel, that you would go to heaven, that you would go to hell. Today, this is the most photorealistic form, just like when an angel was painted. This doesn't exist.
Hello everyone, gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of La Factoria. Today I have the extraordinary pleasure of having one of the biggest references of the flat earth model on this show. We're going to confront ideas, but I'm also coming in with an open mind to listen and try to understand why they defend what they defend. For me, there are many things. And I know society has deceived us, but it hasn't deeply explored this topic, which is why I find this conversation so important and relevant. Welcome, Iru.
How are you, Shota, my friend? All good? Very good, very good. We have to follow the curve. Well, thank you. Thank you for the invitation. It's truly a pleasure for me to be here with you. I was used to seeing you. I was expecting a panel and some kind of verses. I was already telling myself they're going to put me in a verses without warning me. But well, honestly, I like this one-on-one too, huh?
Iru, let me tell you something.
I'm going to vent with you, that's for sure.
No, you can talk to me about anything. I'll have all my legitimate doubts and I'll vent them to you. And well, I see you've come with a lot of information and a bunch of documents. And the goal here is to confront ideas. That's what I do, but I value honor very much. It would be quite cowardly if I tell you that you are going to have a show with me and I bring you here with 3 scientists without you being prepared for them.
A Santolayo or a Fractor, you mean one of those? We're looking for them, huh? We're looking for them. With Pedro, I threw out the idea of having a little debate.
I doubt they'll agree. I always say one thing. Someone unwilling to challenge their ideas with opposing views is never admirable. That happens to me often, like especially with feminism and similar topics. Echo chamber, where everything that's said matches my ideas, is welcome. But when it comes to confronting someone who has a completely different point of view, then I'm not interested, then I don't want to. I don't understand how those people have admirers or are seen as intellectual role models. I just don't get it. When I saw you challenge anyone to a debate, I said, okay, I might not agree with him, but that alone deserves respect and admiration.
Thank you. Actually, at the end of 2024, we had the chance and they really set us up. In the sense that it wasn't really a debate, because usually, as you know very well, in a debate, there's a time for one side to speak, then the other, and so on. But at least we had the chance with Javi Poves to go to Channel 4 on the show Code 10 with a live audience of 2 million viewers. We participated for an hour and 20 minutes in a somewhat circus-like show. Because television usually has to keep things going somehow in that way. For the first time, it finally gave us something we've long requested. Since we get cancelled in a lot of places where we want to go, like you said, to debate, we've even been cancelled. At the University of Cordoba in Spain during a scientific debate, the other side refused to debate the flat earthers. As if we were some kind of subgroup of humanity, as if we weren't also going in with the same cards as they are. I'm specifically referring to science, the scientific method, the formulation of a hypothesis, the consideration of certain initial axioms, and so on, within the framework that is considered today as the scientific method. When we talk about flat earth, we're not doing it initially at least from a belief or religious point of view, as we're often portrayed. It's not dogmatic. Flat earthism isn't a dogma. No, it's not, because what we always do is, that's why I believe more people are joining. The judge is nature, not a person. The person or the scientist or whoever somehow intervenes with nature. The premise in this case is whether it's flat or curved, and if it revolves around the sun, nature delivers the final verdict. What a person can do, in any case, is misinterpret the data that nature gives back to them. And do you think that as of today, in the year 2025, and have you seen this? Or you can even still see it on official channels of science communicators, like the case I mentioned of quantum fracture, Schrodinger's cat, and others who keep mentioning it. Where did the concept of a spherical Earth first arise? Think about it. We don't have the experience of a spherical Earth, not even of its rotation, nor of its curvature. Our senses and our experiences are considered by science. That's how it is, a flat stationary Earth with only the moon, stars, and sun moving.
That's right.
That's exactly the sensory experience which matches official science. No scientist could argue otherwise. Science assumes we are moving and the Earth is curved. No, because that's what they get you. You have to think that the educational system gets us when we're young. It says your senses deceive you since you won't experience a spherical Earth. And besides, your senses are limited because there are only 5 of them. And besides, you only use 10% of your brain, which is a statistic that's often mentioned. Generally, they start instilling limiting beliefs in you. Since you're not going to experience that, from the educational system, have to educate you. I have to indoctrinate you in what you'll never be able to experience. That's the starting point. Previously, before this became widespread in the educational system, the scientific part asked those questions saying, well, if we have the experience of a flat and stationary Earth, then why? And is this where you wanted to get to? It still shows up in science books and even on Wikipedia. When you show evidence of a spherical Earth, people still claim the best direct evidence is a ship vanishing over the horizon. Supposedly, a Greek saw that 2,000 years ago. He saw the ship vanish at Alexandria's port from 5 kilometers away, since that's the farthest the human eye can see. He saw that the ship disappeared, first the lower part, the hull, and then the mast. So he deduced and said, of course, it's doing this, it's hiding geometrically. Obviously, it's a story that was created later. No Greek saw anything, I assure you, especially since optics and similar knowledge didn't exist then. But that's the initial premise.
Can I ask a question? I have one. I've seen a scientist refuting the flat Earth model, saying that an Egyptian already started calculating by
The shadow of the tower.
Eratosthenes, by the shadow of Alexandria of...
The Tower of Alexandria. Okay, tell me the story.
By then it was assumed they had already measured Earth's curvature.
You know, in science, words mean a lot. One thing is to calculate, another thing is to measure. Measuring implies a physical act of measuring. I need something for comparison, like a rope or measuring tape. Let's see, if you want, you need to have a measuring tool. So, that's it. If someone had taken, let's say, a huge measuring tape and walked around the Earth with the measuring tape, then they would have measured it. It's impossible to do that. Eratosthenes calculated, which is different from measuring. Measuring, I repeat, is a physical act. To calculate, I can calculate a lot of things. In fact, to calculate, I can use irrational numbers, negative numbers, or infinite numbers that don't exist in nature. So this Greek, some say he was Egyptian, others say he was Greek. Stories that never get fully confirmed. He was supposedly the director of the Library of Alexandria, and his name was Eratosthenes. His name is very symbolic because you mentioned the word Egyptian. You know that the Egyptian god of knowledge was Thoth. So this is the era of Thoth, Eratosthenes. This is something to keep in mind because a lot of symbolism is used. National Aeronautics and Space Administration still uses Egyptian god names for missions today. But let's suppose that Eratosthenes existed. The guy said, well, I'm starting from a premise that's actually a begging the question fallacy in logical argumentation. What does it mean? That you're already assuming the Earth is spherical without having proven that the Earth is spherical. He said, well, if the earth is spherical, then I can use the shadows cast by the sun on a certain day. And the difference in angles between the shadows will give me the total circumference of the earth. Basically, what he said is, if I have the sun up here and the sun is very, very far away, millions and millions of kilometers, and it casts parallel rays. So imagine that the earth's sphere is bathed in light all at once. So if I have a stick here and the sun is at the zenith, this stick won't cast a shadow, obviously. But if I have a stick here, this stick will cast a shadow, right? So if I assume that the earth is spherical and I project the ray to the center and take this one out, let's say, I assume that the earth has 360 degrees because it's a sphere. I calculate the difference between these two shadows. The 72-degree angle to view the earth has a 40,000 kilometer circumference, said the Greek, who didn't use kilometers since that unit didn't exist yet. It's supposedly 5,000 Greek stadia, which is a lot for life. The math exercise is correct. Flat earthers say the same thing, that same exercise. If instead of placing two sticks like this, I also add this stick here, and instead of assuming that the sun is millions of kilometers away, I assume that the sun is close. When you go outside and see the sun's rays, they are divergent. They're like a triangle that goes to the light source, right? You see them as parallel. Look at the sky, and in those famous religious images, the sun's rays always appear in a triangle. Yeah, so what the flat earther says is, well, according to your mathematical exercise, I experience that the earth is flat. I put the two sticks down. Assuming the light source is close, it doesn't cast a shadow here, but since it's conical, this stick does cast a shadow. I make a triangle with a hypotenuse here, calculate each leg, and find the distance to the sun is 7,500 kilometers. I use the same math exercise, not to determine Earth's shape, but to calculate the sun's distance, and both are valid exercises. The thing is, we see the sun as the same size as the moon, and we don't see the Earth's curvature. The Greek also didn't see Earth's curvature. From when Eratosthenes proposed that idea until around 1950, when humans gained access to rocketry after World War II, it was never possible to launch anything high enough to determine whether the Earth had curvature or not. For 2,300 years, people only speculated Earth was spherical with no direct proof. They kept relying on the little boat story and the little boat story. It's really embarrassing that it took a movement like the modern flat earthers to actually pick up a telescope and instead of pointing it up, point it horizontally and see if the boat disappears. At 5 kilometers, like that Greek proposed, which is still used as an example. What did we realize? The boat doesn't vanish at 5 kilometers. It doesn't go behind any curvature. Anyone can do that. We have observations at 250 kilometers away where you can still see cities and mountains, which is where modern flat earth theory starts with observing nature. And there is no evidence of curvature. The curvature has been disproven, which is a bit like the modern scientific method proposed by Karl Popper with the falsifiability of experimentation.
And a question, Iru. How did you start your journey within this movement? I mean, how did you come across this perspective? Because I want to start a little with the introduction of who you are. I see that you are the most knowledgeable person who could come here to talk about this Earth model, and I want to understand a little. Wait, how did you get to this point before we start to challenge that perspective a bit?
Look, I think, well, I'm 44 years old as of today, basically. You look good for your age. Thank you very much, because I actually take testosterone.
I'm going to give you a box so you can take more.
That's why I stay young, but I'll have some to wet my mouth. It's good, right? Yes, it's good. Was everything you said true? Yes, all true. How did I start? I've always been someone who, well, in Argentina we have a tradition. Surely, just like you have here in Spain, we are a religious country, specifically Judeo-Christian. We are Hispanic. Exactly. I was baptized. I took communion. I started in the Catholic stage of the Roman Empire. And you...
Are you of Italian descent? Are you Italo-Argentinian?
I'm a second-generation Argentine. My dad was first generation since my grandfather escaped World War II. But there are many Italians in Argentina, right? Yes. And besides, I went to an Italian school. I have connections with people who have family in Italy and so on. So what's the issue? I began questioning my religion when I was 12 or 13. Even though I was never a big reader of the Bible, like maybe other branches of religion like evangelical or Jehovah's Witness, which are more practicing, at least in Argentina, than Catholics. Catholics are more about going to Mass and that kind of thing, but maybe they're not so involved in the daily reading of the Bible. So that gave me some freedom, like to look at things from the outside a bit and start questioning my belief system, which at that time was the Catholic religion. I started to question it. I started to get a bit more involved in my life as a young man. Towards the scientific side, you could say, because nowadays I'm a visual effects director, I do visual effects for movies, I do motion graphics and so on. And you have to get into some physical concepts and some particle simulations, not at a scientific or practical level, but at a graphical level. It's a different area, but you need to know certain concepts related to using some physical things. I gravitated towards science and became a bit of a space fanatic. Who hasn't? As a kid in the 90s, Star Wars and Star Trek, both popular since the 70s. Astronomy and all that, well, not so much astronomy, but definitely movies. Specifically, Back to the Future was the movie that changed my reality, that made me choose my profession, but I was always drawn to that field. Until one day, I came across the pyramid with the eye on the $1 bill. And I asked myself, what is this? I was about 18 or 19 then and wondered why the pyramid with Novus Ordo Seclorum was there. I'm telling you about the year 98, 99. There was no internet like today, so I couldn't just Google Illuminati pyramid. Wasn't it all just a matter of you asking yourself and maybe this? Answers came from someone, your father, a friend, or maybe a grandfather who could tell you something, maybe a book you found in a library like that. Yeah, that's when I began trying to understand the world around us, not just politically, but also economically and religiously. The current time is not yet still spiritual. No, because later you realize it from this side. At that moment, I was really drawn to the idea of free. In a sphere, and even if you don't believe it, the fact that the Earth is a sphere has a dogma. That's why it's called the Copernican Doctrine. What it means to say or justify is that we are an evolution of the primate. The Earth is 13.45 billion years old, and the Big Bang occurred 13.5 trillion years ago. We are insignificant, just a small stone in the universe with no purpose. According to Yuval Noah Harari, humans have no spirit and are merely matter. There is no animated matter. One day you will die, decompose, and that's it. That's your experience. That's what the spherical Earth shows. We can discuss it more later if you want. I was caught in that paradigm when I began questioning things, just as the internet emerged. If I watched Seiskes's documentary and was deeply affected by learning the truth about the Twin Towers and the Federal Reserve's dollar printing, there was a common pattern, which was that it didn't matter what level of power people were at, and there was always some occult aspect. And that's where Freemasonry starts, and then I started getting into the Jesuit order. And it seems that the material world they somehow govern is always subordinated to something subtle, astral, energetic. It's as if things are planned on another plane of existence and then materialize in this plane of reality.
Would you say I could even call it satanic?
Well, satanic, I'd say more if you want, but it depends on the lodge. Is it more Luciferian? No, because Satan simply means adversary. In Kabbalah, Satan is mentioned often, but where does the idea of Satan originate? It comes from Saturn, because for the Romans, obviously, the god Saturn had two concepts. The first is about boundaries, right? That's also why it has the ring. And the ring is symbolized as what sets your boundaries, and Saturn is time. When we or the Bible say that, one interprets that Satan is the owner of the world, and for other cultures, he's the demiurge and so on. That analogy works because, in reality, time controls matter in the material world as only time can. Even though it's a concept, what we understand as time is the only thing that can make things grow, develop, and die. The material owner of the world is Satan, it's time, that's the material owner, and Satan has it. 666 because it has 60 minutes, 60 seconds, so in numerology you reduce it by adding 606 from the 60 minutes, 60 from the 60 seconds. It's 6 and it has 24 hours. 2 plus 4 is 6. 666. Which is linked to carbon and its breakdown, so matter carries all that symbolism. And then obviously the most dominant religion, Catholicism, drew him in red, with two little horns and a tail, but that also has a symbolism. The red is the lower chakra connecting with the earth. So you have the red earth, the sky, which is this blue. As you move up the chakras, you ascend to the crown and reach white, passing through violet, blue, green, orange, yellow, and red. That's why red is associated with hell and blue with the sky. But these are all symbols that we aren't taught to interpret. So to wrap up, being satanic is something that if you simply reduce it to people who do evil, that's a very reductionist way to use that term. Because as I said, Satan is Saturn, representing time, which rules the material world.
Luciferian is something else. Okay, then would you define it? Going back to the conversation that all these major events, all these big happenings, like for example, the fall of the Twin Towers, September 11th, and so on, have the same pattern, ritualism.
They practice astrological, numerological, and other types of ritualism. Surely some of it even escapes us because we're not at that inner circle. When it comes to planning an event where you're going to make an impact,
yes, there are several topics about 11s.
The 11M as well, hey, but
we can't talk much about that topic on YouTube.
You can't say much about it, but my point is the dates aren't accidental. They line up. Sorry. The numerology that's used, there's that famous phrase by John Pierpont Morgan who said, millionaires don't use astrology, billionaires do. And why is that? Because even if you don't believe in gods, because they also put the concept of God in us as just, well, no, a bearded being in a white robe up there watching to punish or reward you. But the terminology of God is a bit more complex where you can even identify yourself with it. You know how in English they say God, God is called God, and that refers to generator, organizer, and destroyer. Generator, order, destroyer. That's what a God is. A God is that will, that consciousness that is capable of generating, ordering, and destroying. That's what we do in many ways, not just materially, but also symbolically. If you have a bad relationship with someone, maybe you caused it, it was organized, and the moment that relationship starts to fall apart, do you have to destroy it to create a new one? We keep repeating this, it's like being reborn in life, or people tell you, right? You need to realize you must rebuild yourself, especially when others notice you're feeling down or depressed. Whatever that is, what God does, God in terms of the world, what He did was create the world. The main question is, who made this and how? But ultimately, the point of this idea of, at least as we see it, the lesser gods are the stars and the planets. So this idea of Apollo, or the idea of seeing Saturn, seeing Jupiter, seeing Mars, Venus, this Mercury, do all those alchemical allegories still influence us? So the big corporations, in some way, which have never set aside astrology, know that there are specific moments when it comes to manipulating large masses. And then they look at the sky to see what the gods are telling them. Lesser in terms of God, the supreme creator of the great spirit who maybe put us here in this experience. They base everything on that, which is why I won't say it always works out for them. But somehow they manage to interfere with the collective unconscious, where the masses end up not waking up because they know exactly when they have to do it.
So, to follow the thread of the conversation, you start coming across all this information when you're young, and how do you want to continue? I'm already aware of everything you're saying and don't deny it. My audience knows that many of the things you're stating today I also believe. But what's your process to get to the point of flat earth theory? Because that's already the biggest deception. If it is one,
they say the mother of all conspiracies has had that title, that one. At first,
Kennedy was talking about it earlier with one of your colleagues who's watching us over there. That death. We all know the term conspiracy comes from trying to delegitimize the accusation that many Americans were making against the United States government. Because Kennedy had an extremely critical speech about the Federal Reserve of the United States of America, so they invented the term conspiracy to delegitimize. Well, everyone knows who killed Kennedy, but to me it already seems excessive.
Too extreme.
Too extreme, yes.
And then
we could end up getting into... I've said it on a podcast, and I apologize again to Enrique because he...
called me out on it. Greetings to Enrique.
He's calming. I've talked to him and all that. I want to talk to him about a few things. And honestly, I admire him a lot because he defends what he believes in with a lot of passion. And I said on a podcast that really talking about reptiles, talking about these things, wow, what it does is push people away from a series of deceptions that are actually much more tangible. Like 2020 and the bug, the inoculations, the big pharma companies. We've discussed the towers brought down by planes, the existence of a third tower, and the owner of those towers
Tawas justo.
had insured
1 month.
before. I mean, these are such tangible, provable, and obvious things that I think we can do a lot of damage there. Gentlemen, the system deceives and oppresses us. Now then, how do you go from seeing totally tangible things like the pyramid, what I just mentioned, to questioning everything? Because this is the ultimate questioning. That's how I see it. Is there really no single truth?
Well, not totally. Look, about Kennedy, remember that in that famous speech Kennedy gave a couple of weeks before he was assassinated, brutal? By the way, I'm not going to quote him exactly because I don't remember it. But he starts by saying that the very word secrecy is repugnant in a society that is supposed to be open. And he says in that speech that the system has a great military, economic, political, and scientific machinery. So it wasn't related to an anti-communist speech. It doesn't have to do with a system of lodges, right? He was talking about occultism.
He openly says the United States has been hijacked. We are fighting against forces that operate from the shadows.
He said that word for word. And the Kennedy family weren't exactly innocent either, right? They were also involved in a lot of things. And then the way they were targeted, and suddenly they also started dying too.
Their family members.
But it's very interesting because besides Kennedy, think about it. Kennedy was the one who had to start the space program for the United States. It was during Kennedy's presidency. Before that, National Aeronautics and Space Administration was starting to form, though it had a different name. And then National Aeronautics and Space Administration comes along, also created by occultists, not created by occultists. But let's remember that in National Aeronautics and Space Administration, the father of rocketry was Jack Parsons, who Jack Parsons, it officially says so, it's on Wikipedia. He followed Aleister Crowley's philosophy and prayed to him according to Wikipedia, Jack Parsons. He prayed to the god Pan before launching a rocket. You might wonder, who is Pan? That's also where all the
symbolism comes from.
The symbolism of Peter Pan comes from, who takes children to Neverland. Pan is the god of fertility, but also, let's say, of pedophilia. And that's the god that the father of the National Aeronautics and Space Administration used to pray before every rocket launch. And that's where the current name of the Jet Propulsion Laboratory comes from. National Aeronautics and Space Administration is often called Jack Parsons Laboratory, and many claim the agency is full of occultism. The National Aeronautics and Space Administration logo is a snake's tongue. The word Nasha Buyo, which is written the same way, but instead of just the letter H, the H has a small line above it. In Hebrew, does it mean deception? Does the word Nasha itself mean deception?
I'll ask Raul Duran.
The word over there means deception and ascension. But just like in Hebrew, everything has a double meaning because there are no vowels and so on. You can look it up and see it yourself. So everything you're saying to me, since I started here on this podcast, everything I've told you and will tell you is fully verifiable. The information that isn't verifiable, I'll tell you, this is just my opinion since I can't reach that verifiable point. So the flat earth topic is the most verifiable thing we have because it's the world we live in. It's the very nature that you can experience every day. We're not talking about the astral plane, going to the dark side of the moon, or entering the fourth dimension. No, a Pleiadian appeared to me here yesterday, but I can't prove it to you. We're talking about whether the horizon curves 20 centimeters every kilometer, which is the calculation it should give. 8 inches per square mile in metric for North America, and it stays flat. Also, does the Earth revolve around the Sun, and can we prove it rotates? You can't mechanically prove the Earth rotates, right? We can discuss it more later if you want.
More scientifically?
If you will, that's the most verifiable thing. That's why it's the mother of all conspiracies. Because if the Earth is not a sphere, there are a lot of paradigms in terms of education, economics, and politics that go down the drain. I mean, like, for example, Imagine, for example, nowadays, global warming. What is it based on? Global warming is supposedly based on the idea that the Earth, or
The poles are going to melt.
yes, that's like a consequence. But it's based on the fact that the Earth is a sphere and we have a very fragile atmosphere, and we're in an expanding universe that's totally empty. We're a really fragile little ball where even a solar flare could melt it, because you're not going to melt the ice just by throwing yourself on it. That's supposedly a greenhouse effect.
Idiots will believe that.
It's supposedly a greenhouse effect caused by carbon monoxide, too, and so on. But we are also exposed to major changes because a solar flare, assuming that the sun is a giant thermonuclear source that's 150 million kilometers away, and as if it were a god from ancient times. So it has a solar flare that will destroy all your satellites and melt the poles and so on and so on. Or the meteorite that's going to, every day there's news about a meteorite passing close to Earth. That thing you read in the news, that's money I have. It's public access, or you can visit the official United States government website and see how National Aeronautics and Space Administration scientists go to Congress to ask for money to create a meteorite monitoring office. And they get a lot of money. Here in Spain, it's the same. They just created, following the American example, the Spanish Space Force, because there's already the Space Force that Trump created in the United States, the German Space Force, and the French Space Force. But nobody goes to space. However, they show up. Now, the Spanish military oath is to swear by air and space, but who actually goes to space? That's public money. I'm just giving you a simple example. Do you think that the modern aerospace industry combined surpasses the entertainment, film, and music industries? And tell me, you quote me, just name one benefit that the space race has brought us as human beings here in the world that improved the world because of the space race.
I couldn't tell you. Honestly, I'd be lying if I...
Say it benefited us, but besides the deaths, how did it benefit us? The military industry, it's at a civilian level.
The military industry. Well, I think that the military industry often creates conflicts to make a profit.
I'm not saying the technology you're using is military. The computer and radar are military. There are many examples. I'll ask again. Give me one way the space race has benefited humanity. You can't. You can't think of any?
Engine technology.
Not everything is military. Of course, the rocket, whether Elon Musk launches it today or the European Space Agency does in Europe, is still just a metal cylinder burning fire. No improvement, just a digital screen added. It's like the car. The car, we should already be using a non-electric Tesla car with free energy from the real Tesla. Or when they killed Stanley Meyer, who in the 1980s in the United States showed how to run an engine on water, and they poisoned him. Or a Spaniard too. A Spaniard also discovered the combustion engine with water, and they took him down too. And your car, what is it now? The only thing it has is a digital radio and a global positioning system, and the rest is still the same, and the space rocket is exactly the same.
I am fully aligned with the concept you are trying to reflect here. There's an entire industry that wants to keep some things hidden because they profit from the ignorance of the majority of the population, right? So you're saying that the flat earth model is that, but taken to the extreme, right?
I gave examples because you asked what would change. Economically, many things would change. I gave you two very simple examples, but what I'm getting at is in political terms. Today, governments always have a scientific panel that asks for taxpayers' money for things that have no benefit to humanity. And in fact, there's a great document from the Kennedy era by McNagan. His name is McNagan, called the Iron Mountain Report. The Iron Mountain Report. It's official, look it up. Today, it's presented like a novel similar to what Yuval Noah Harari or George Orwell wrote. These are later used in reality. And in the Iron Mountain Report, the government was requesting, how can we create a substitute war model to keep profiting economically? Because when there is war, the state coffers are open because the country must be defended. So everything is justified since there is no war in the 60s beyond the Cold War. A substitute model, do you know what the number one item of that substitute model is? A gigantic space program with no achievable goals that remains an illusion the whole time, and that's what we see today, the space race. What is it? Are we going back to the moon? Okay, guys. They went in 69 with 2 contraptions and basic computing calculations. From a calculator, basically, even though there were a lot of computers, they don't even reach 1% of what we have in a cell phone. We can't go back. Every year, starting in 2025, they announce plans to go to the moon.
I'm actually more aligned with you there than you might imagine. I am. After watching several videos and after seeing several things and after seeing that it hasn't been done again, not even close to the point that the video. I don't know if we made it to the moon or not. I'm not going to confirm or deny that. But what I will give you is that the video of Armstrong getting off and the rest looks like it was filmed by Kubrick.
Kubrick filmed it. I believe at some point he lost control, which is how things turned out for him. No, obviously, even with that great movie Eyes Wide Shut, trying to expose all those secret occult lodges, is that it? But to wrap up in economic terms, there are a lot of things that would change. In terms of education, many fields would have to be restructured, like geology, anthropology, paleontology, even astronomy itself, which is completely useless. They all basically end up being teachers or working on improving lenses because nobody travels, no astronomer has ever traveled anywhere. They keep us thinking that maybe the Earth is going to be destroyed, so we should try to populate another planet, but we haven't even gone back to the moon. They dangled Mars in front of us like a carrot on a stick. There are a lot of things that would change in earthly terms. When you explore flat Earth theory, you eventually wonder if the system isn't open. Does that mean rockets don't go anywhere? So, is the circuit we live in closed? And it's a closed circuit that is self-sustaining, that has free and infinite energy for all the inhabitants of this world. And that's a bit of what someone like Nikola Tesla was after, for example, or what other scientists were pursuing when they got involved in this. He was also persecuted, and by the Morgans, because they sold the electrical grid. They had Thomas Edison, and they had to charge for electricity and a lot of other things. So the big question is, where does the Earth get its electrical and magnetic supply from? It's infinite, it never ended, never... Where did Earth's water originate? Do you know what the official theory is about why our world has water? I mean, you have to believe it. You just have to believe it. The story that ever since the Big Bang was created, when the Big Bang happened, Jardinus is said to be 13.5 billion years old, while Earth is 4.5 billion. Those numbers are unimaginable for us. That's what they say. Official science claims that's one theory. We assume that during a primitive stage of the Earth, and they mention this to you like it's normal. Billions and billions and billions of meteorites, of asteroids actually fell to Earth and brought water as if they were buckets. As our planet formed, an asteroid would arrive. It would impact and release water, which is how we ended up with oceans.
Official theories of the...
Science can't explain where all the water came from, so they have no answers. However, in our real experience, what we know is that there will always be water. Water, the magnetic field, and electricity will never run out. The circuit is closed, and the oil continually regenerates itself. It's already known today that it isn't related to fossil or bone remains of any species. It's a big lie they sold us to raise the price. It has a lot to do with those called the Rockefellers. So how is oil self-generated? After a certain amount of time, our system is closed. The big mystery is always Antarctica. What's happening in Antarctica? They don't let us go there as civilians, and everything has been so tightly controlled since World War II, but people have gone.
There's a YouTuber called Lethal Crisis. Have you seen him?
Yes, but you need prior authorization to visit military bases or certain locations. The government of your country. You can't go to Antarctica on your own. You have to ask for everything. You have to get permission, especially in Antarctica. Unlike when I request permission to enter places like the United States or the Himalayas, I do ask for permission to enter a country like India. But then there are certain areas of nature where I can go if I want to. I can go die on a mountain because things went wrong and I didn't finish climbing what I wanted to climb. In Antarctica, you can't do that. In Antarctica, you go to a designated base and you can't have freedom of movement. And say, now I'm going to try to cross Antarctica like this, in a straight line, to come out the other side. You can't do that. How? To come out the other side, and if the Earth is spherical and Antarctica is down here, hasn't anyone ever crossed it like this? No one crosses it. It's impossible. No one ever has. Maybe here we can discuss the flat earth model and its people. We are never taught this map. That one
is the flat earth model.
It's an official map called the Eggleston projection. The model is more complex because the model would also involve explanations related to how the stars work and so on. Eclipses too?
Everything. But that
Doesn't intend to.
does flat earth theory conflict with eclipses? With all that?
No, because all of that is a phenomenon that we observe in the sky and see. No one denies that planets, stars, eclipses, and the seasons of the year exist. That's simply from one model, it's explained one way, and from our model, it's explained another way. This is the equivalent of the map you had in school. What map? Which map do you remember the most? The world map.
Also, and like that, a straight...
Exactly, that's called the Mercator projection. To arrive?
Then he wraps it in a sphere.
And it gets distorted because it's a rectangular projection. I mean cylindrical, it's not a spherical projection. So when you put it in a sphere, it gets distorted. This happens to a lot of the parts, especially the poles. Why was that map made? Why did Gerard Mercator make that map? Because it's an imperialist map. It's a map that was used for conquest, where supposedly there's a middle line, which is the equator, and the rich countries are on top, and the poor countries are on the bottom. The so-called poor countries, which are actually the richest in natural resources, are the ones with the largest area, the biggest ones like South Africa. Well, Africa in general, Argentina, Australia, all that area as it is now. Are you going to...
Understand specifically?
No, poor in the sense of indigenous people, rich in natural resources. Okay, yes, but you're not referring to the country's economy. I'm not talking about poor as in poor people, that you have to go evangelize them, educate them, conquer them, take their resources, and so on and so on. Are European countries also large like that? Tiny then on that imperialist map. What they're trying to do is give a worldview where they want to teach something that isn't actually true. And to create you as if there were different classes, like there are classes of people, classes of countries. Is that the map they teach you here? European education differs significantly from that of so-called third world countries. But they also give us that map made back in 1490 something, which has been questioned several times. And what about this map here? This is an official patent, not a homemade map left for someone to find. This is a map that has a patent, which was patented in 1869 in countries. Here, European countries, Britain, Sweden, and so on and so on. And it was created almost 400 years later, meaning it has 400 years more technology than what they teach you in school. And here you understand everything. Here you see that trips around the world, even if it sounds silly, are really like this. Even if the earth is flat, you can still go around the world if you want. If you form a circle at this table, you go around the world. When you orient yourself, compasses always point north, so you can go around the world perfectly. Flights, the airplanes that take north-south or south-north routes, are short. No one has ever traveled north on a spherical earth, gone underneath, and returned to the same spot. Yet hundreds of times a day, people go around the world from west to east and return to the same place. But that's not possible in our model. Why can't it be done? Because there's no south, there's only a boundary called Antarctica, and wherever you go, there's no pole. North Pole, we call it the North Center because it's a center where the compasses point. It's right there in the middle. Oh, and of course it's in the middle, and what we have is what we call the South. You always end up at Antarctica. You'll always run into Antarctica and you can't cross it, so you have to go back the way you came. Since the Earth is flat, the inner equator circle is smaller than the outer equator circle. So actually, the continental distribution means that the continents further south are not only the largest, but also the most distant. Traveling to anything related to the southern part of the world is very far. Airlines even have much longer flights than here in Europe, of course. But why? Because if you look at it as a flat Earth, it matches up perfectly. The short flight routes are from the equator inward. The long routes go outward. The continental distribution, the Pacific completely empty, huge. So when they teach you this in school, You begin to grasp many aspects of the natural world you can observe firsthand. There's no reason to discuss conspiracy theories. This isn't one. This is the daily life of each one of us. There's a reason they show you a different map. There's a reason they bombard you with movies. There's a reason they ridicule the flat earth so much. The flat earth meme suggests we live on a square with a turtle underneath, and if you reach the edge, you fall off. They mock it to discourage you. This kind of what you're saying, maybe this thing about the reptilians where they use ridicule as a theme, but it's to keep you away from verifiable information. So, if today you think about us, nowadays it's already been 10 years since I started back in 2015. At first we were pretty much alone, but with him as time went by. Nowadays there are airplane pilots, there are astrophysicists, there are engineers. There's even a case of an engineer in the United States. To get into something more technical, a civil engineer. He has his channel on YouTube. It's called Jota Tolan Media Uno. Jota Tolan Media Uno. He is a civil engineer and United States military contractor, and he takes many flights from the east coast of the United States to the west coast. Alright, so he got involved in 2018 with this topic. He said, check out this group of people who talk about the flat earth. Let's see, I'm going to take a look at it for a bit. He looks and says, they're not that wrong. I mean, the point they're making is a valid one. It might be wrong, but it's valid. It's not something that's impossible to achieve. Let's see if it rains diamonds on Jupiter's moon. No, it's not something that just anyone can test nowadays. So the engineer says, well, I fly on commercial planes all the time. I'm going to take advantage of one of those flights to make a long distance observation. Given that Earth is said to be a sphere about 12,700 kilometers in diameter, when you rise to 10 kilometers in altitude and draw a tangent line, if the Earth is spherical, from 10 kilometers high, I shouldn't be able to see beyond the horizon at 350 kilometers. That's mathematical, the curvature or the curvature. The curvature would be here. Can you see official measurements? Is it this little drawing from there? What happens to the plane at 10 kilometers high? Remember, after we prepare to...
Put this little one on, okay?
Yes.
That little one?
That's an official astronomy page. Okay, that's all he could see. Here's the curvature table. At 10 kilometers high, I can see 357,000 meters. That is 357 kilometers away. Alright, perfect. The guy grabs a video camera and gets on the plane. And...
Here you have a newspaper clipping from a scientific magazine, I imagine.
according to
Mathematical calculations from about 10,000 meters altitude, roughly the height at which commercial airplanes fly. We would see the Earth's surface, the horizon, with a curvature of 0.056 degrees. The same as if we completed a circle with a 10-meter radius from 56 centimeters away. That is this newspaper clipping.
But I kept going down. That is at this point of what I did.
That is at this point. And assuming the sky is clear, we would barely notice that the planet is round. Barely. But to see it well, we'd need to fly higher, perhaps over 15,000 meters. At 20,000 meters, it's already noticeable. It's true for some photos taken from lower down, like planes, parachutes, paragliders, or mountain peaks. The horizon appears curved, but that's due to the distortion or barrel effect of the camera lenses.
Hold on to that for a second. Look, let me finish the other thing first. That, not what it says here, but what I was telling you about. When in this newspaper, they say we should only see it from a plane, they tell you, and it's true. There are a lot of people we've met who say, but how can the Earth be flat if I saw it from a plane? They don't even know their own mathematical model from a plane, even on their best days. Supposedly, you could have a small one. Some think it's curved, but it might just look circular since we see in circles. There it tells you that you have to fly at 10,000 meters, but what we're looking for is not to see the curvature, because then we go back to the point I mentioned to you. If Earth's curvature is nearly invisible at 10 kilometers high, what did he actually see? The Greek who saw the ship, who wasn't even there, he was standing at about 1 meter 70. He was already standing there looking at a ship. He said, we notice Earth's curvature either at 10 kilometers or when a ship disappears, which is when cognitive dissonance starts. Can you tell me what the Greek guy said? He saw the curvature of the Earth at sea from a height of 1 meter 70, but I can barely see it at 10 kilometers high. That's when a mental conflict begins. It's not a lie, that's how it is, but what happens? What they tell you is no, The Greek taking indirectly, the Greek didn't see the curvature. What he saw was that an object was being occluded. And then he deduced that this hiding is because of the geometric shape of the Earth. That's it, perfect. He says this engineer goes up to 10 kilometers high. In the official mathematical model, I can't see more than 350 kilometers. He grabs the camera, puts an infrared lens on it, and starts filming the entire flight path. Everything is on his official channel with over 30 similar videos. As I said, when he lands, he enters the data into the computer, downloads the videos, and reviews the trajectory and footage. To his surprise, the guy records it. This thing down here, which you're going to see in black and white, can I fold it? Yes, you can fold it. The black and white images below are due to the infrared filter. What do you end up realizing? Long-range vision.
Distance 804 kilometers from
10,000.
kilometers high. How much can you see?
350. He's seeing triple what the model does. Not even Galileo or Copernicus could do that. I mean,
if it's spherical, of course.
It's not like they've told us it can't be spherical. It doesn't, no, it can't be spherical. Besides, it doesn't make any sense because it can't be spherical. We would need to live on a spherical Earth to take those measurements. This one already has a diameter of 48,000 kilometers, so it no longer fits any kind of airplane flight measurement. Everything goes to hell for nothing. We are requesting that observation that they publicly take it, that please to the YouTubers who like to make science videos. We board a commercial plane. Tickets cost about 300 euros. How much does infrared cost? Nothing. The infrared costs 80 euros. It costs an infrared lens, and then the camera is a video camera.
The thing about infrared, you and I get on a plane and we can do it. The ideal, do you know what?
Would be what we talked about there on Pedro's podcast. Let the Flat Earth team get on, the Globe Earth team get on, and let's have both teams make the same observation and see what result we get. And once and for all, when we land and put down the data, and the data shows a certain conclusion, then let's address that conclusion. This guy on his YouTube channel has more than 30 flights like this, and you can always see much more than you should according to the model. Think about it. We now have the technology, not just optical, but also to elevate ourselves. 10 kilometers to be able to make those calculations? The spherical Earth theory was proposed by a Greek who stood about 1.7 to 1.8 meters tall. Then came Copernicus and Galileo, who could barely get on a horse practically, and we didn't have the technology until the 20th century to test the Earth's curvature. And when, in the 20th and into the 21st century, we tested the Earth's curvature, it turned out that the Earth's curvature doesn't exist. Think about the fact that there are people who put their professional careers on the line. This happened to us with a pilot who attended our 2020 conference in Madrid. He gave testimony about how they are taught to fly a plane mechanically. That's what's assumed, that here are the patents. Think about it. When you look at National Aeronautics and Space Administration's patents, these are official National Aeronautics and Space Administration patents. And what's underlined in red? It says an airplane, helicopter, or missile is designed to fly. Assuming that the Earth is flat and stationary, you're reading it right there, not rotating, flat Earth. That's official, isn't it? No flying device actually works. Calculating that the Earth spins or is curved, everything is assumed as if we are on a flat, stationary, non-rotating Earth. And these are serious things because here you're putting civilian lives at risk, or you're using military equipment so that a missile hits a specific target. You're not going to assume that the Earth is spinning below if the Earth spins downward. Obviously, you would have to calculate logically. That's the famous Coriolis effect and more. The pilot arrived, testified, and spoke. Yes, they teach us at the academy that supposedly the Earth is spherical and all that, but everything flies as if it was still and flat. It's called an aeroplane. The plane tilts during takeoff and landing, then flies at cruising speed and altitude with a 3-degree tilt for lift. It goes over a flat surface. There's no way around it. I think I had it around here. His own, I'll look it up for you now, the actual manual from the academy where this man studied, which is the official one basically. They constantly mention a flat stationary Earth. That's why we say, look, we're not that crazy. At least we're questioning what it says. Here you have this. It's the official pilot manual. There you have it marked in red.
What does it say there? And there is a flat Earth. The Earth's curvature is 0. The Earth is flat, and the curvature of the Earth is
0.
The Earth does not rotate.
That's correct. It's in the manuals. Aviation has mass.
Constant. Good thing I speak English. Otherwise, you'd mess me up.
So what I'm getting at is, this man came, got on stage, and gave his testimony. And ordinary people, like what happened in 2020, the same people started reporting him to the airline to get him fired. And I'm talking about the mid-level agents, the famous trolls who at first demanded and told you, it's just that none of you are here because there are no pilots who speak up, because there are no engineers who speak up. When they do speak up, they report them, like what happened with the doctors, those same Agent Smiths programmed among us. The shock is too strong, it's too much cognitively, the shock is just too strong. That's what it causes them. That even what they demand, when they have it, they don't want it and they reject it. So I'm telling you, the thing is, this is going to get worse, it's not going to get better. Tomorrow there won't be fewer flat earthers, tomorrow there won't be fewer people questioning the system, there will be more and more and more. That's why, for example, consider a public fact from 2019 that you might not know. In the United States Congress, the CEOs of of YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter were summoned, and they were asked to change the algorithm regarding flat Earth, and as of today, this didn't happen before. You go on YouTube and type in flat Earth, and you get anti-flat Earth videos. It's basically the only one. They're going to
demonetize it.
No, they can't demonetize it for you. They put it on the shadow banning. When you basically dedicate yourself 100% to this topic, I suffer from that, I suffer from it, but sometimes. And why? Where is the harm? Searching for Freemasonry brings up Freemason videos, and searching for reptilians shows many reptilian topics. If I search for salad, YouTube offers me salad. It's not going to give me a pizza, right? Type in flat Earth. Anti-flat Earth content appears despite specifically requesting flat Earth. So if we are crazy, then why does the system have to constantly try to cover up, hide, ridicule, and it doesn't work for them? You already know what the issue is. National Aeronautics and Space Administration spends $70 million a day, plus the European and Russian space agencies. With all that money, people who study this topic stop believing them. What if you spend so much on a space show and people still don't believe you? You have no way to buy them. You've run out of all the tools to try to keep them in the system. If I come to you and tell you, tomorrow I'll give you $1 million to get 4 AstraZeneca shots.
No way.
Not me, same here. What if tomorrow I give you $1 million to... No, you know what? If you give me, instead of sending Kaleha to space...
I'd take $1 million to say the Earth is round, right? Well, because...
Not a flat earther yet? No, I wouldn't sleep with them for $1 million. I wouldn't accept $1 million. Take me to the International Space Station? As a flat earther, I'll let you know if it's round or flat when I return. Why doesn't anyone take any of them? The Kaleha show you watch is nothing, just 100 kilometers. That's all, why don't you send Kaleha? He mocks us, does segments on flat earthers and other topics as if I were an astronaut. He went 100 kilometers up and saw nothing. Not stars, not the curvature, nothing. Still, there he is. Just imagine, when we went with Javi and Pobes to Channel 4, there were 2 million viewers. Imagine if you do a show between Kaleha and a flat earther. Are they going to go to space? It would be amazing if people want to see that kind of drama. Flat earther stuff pays off. As we say in Argentina, it attracts an audience and boosts engagement. Flat earth videos generate hundreds of thousands. Not from us flat earthers, but from the anti-flat earthers who make videos to laugh at us. Or to highlight flat earther ideas, they get massive views. Imagine a television show where Kaleha takes a Blue Origin flight with a flat earther. And why?
Doesn't Quantum Fracture or any of them want to sit with you? Science YouTubers?
It happened in 2000 and I think again in 2020 when we were there in lockdown. Javi Pobes, the soccer player who's a great friend and I'm about to meet up with him, started talking to us. I don't recall what started it. I think Schrodinger's cat was involved. Broadcasting live, and Javi Pobis writes to her and joins, and the cat invites him. This is recorded, it's uploaded. There's not even the full 3-hour video on Schrodinger's cat's channel. There's only an hour and 20 minutes, but there was a 3-hour video where it starts with her talking. Schrodinger's cat with Javi Povs. Around 20 minutes in, even Schrodinger's cat couldn't keep up with his argument. And he's supposedly a soccer player, not a scientist or science communicator. Because a soccer player cornered her, so Schrodinger's cat, Rocio Vidal, who I'm talking about, starts feeling uncomfortable and says, "Excuse me, I'll call my friend Crespo from Quantum Fracture. Don't you get along with anyone?" "No, I neither get along nor clash," she says. Schrodinger's cat, she calls him on the phone, just calls him. At one point, it was Crespo from Quantum Fracture. The cat against Javi Pofes. So Javi Pofes says, "No, well, hold on. If you call Quantum Fracture, I'll call Landucci." So I went up. Javi Pofes leaves, leaving only Schrodinger's cat and Crespo. Daniel Marquez, a friend who studied engineering for 4 years, and Javi Poves, being strategic, steps down and tells us to stay. And that lasted 3 hours and 20 minutes. And well, it's just a matter of you watching it. Key questions were raised, like the example about Jay Tolan's airplane and Crespo's response. Got totally uncomfortable and ended up saying, "Well, I would have to see it for myself." Take a look. We're waiting for your answer on why they don't want to. Just like what happened with Jordi Wild's podcast, where Carl Estora and David Parcerisa went, Enrique told Jordi Wilde, "I'm going with Landucci. We don't want Landucci." Why? They don't want equals, they want to ridicule others and put on a show. It's just a matter of looking at what Carl Estora did to realize what that guy did. Love. Quantum and quantum fracture. As Santolala has a lot to lose, and I'll be honest with you, over this time there's a conversation in a podcast by Jordi Wild with Quantum Fracture that we often play throughout the year. I'm not sure if it was 2021 or 2022 when Jordi Wild said that to him. "I'd like to bring on a flat earther," and Quantum Fracture says, "Be careful, because if a flat earther gets you with a well-constructed argument, and there are many who have their arguments very well put together, he'll screw you over like that," literally, says Quantum Fracture. They know that you might come across a flat earther who is maybe very biblical, very Catholic. So they justify things with the biblical genesis and that one, right? But if you go to a flat earther, the kind we're talking about, and they bring up all this stuff, well, are you an astronaut or what? You haven't seen it, no matter how much it hurts or how much you defend it. With numbers, with calculations, you haven't seen it, and that's not scientific. You haven't experienced it. For you, this is a belief, unfortunately. Even if it's a reality, it is a belief is something you haven't seen and won't see. Santolalla from Datum Blog applied to be an astronaut, but only passed the first round. They eliminated him in the second round. I think they eliminated him because of this. I think they eliminated him because nobody goes to outer space. So it's not as easy as people really think. Defending that the Earth is demonstrably spherical is not easy. It's easy to talk about outer space because nobody can go and check it. But here on Earth, the observations, the measurements, the measuring don't benefit them.
So do you think they don't confront your ideas because you would eat them alive? Well, here we make a call. Any scientist, anyone who feels prepared to come and debate with Landucci will do that show. And
I'm going to tell you something.
As someone dedicated to debating, nothing makes me more suspicious than a story doesn't want to confront its counterpart. I was saying it here. I confronted it. I often experience this with feminism. I want to debate the top, most educated feminists and those who strongly defend that ideology. They avoid debating because their story falls apart. For me, the fact that top heliocentric scientists refuse to debate is telling. Honestly, it makes me suspicious. By avoiding confrontation, they only create more distrust in the system. Without fully buying everything you say yet. Honestly, my mind is open enough to say, okay, what you've shown me, it's quite revealing, to say the least. And above all, the most revealing thing is that they don't want to debate. Why don't they want to debate?
Look, let me tell you, had you ever read at some point the magazine Muy Interesante that talked about the 15 kilometers of altitude? We have launched, and many people have launched, hot air balloons, not to 15, not even 15, not even 20, but to 36 kilometers of altitude. This thing you see with the magenta line, that would be the expected curvature at that altitude. And here you can see a completely straight and level horizon with the peculiarity that you never see stars. That's also quite an interesting topic. At 36 kilometers high, this is what you should see but don't. You don't see the ship vanish at 5, nor the 357 kilometers at 10 kilometers high. At 36 kilometers high, you still can't see the curvature even where it should be obvious. The only place you see it is elsewhere. It's with a fisheye lens, as the article says. Or on television through the space agencies. You're not going to see anything other than a television show.
Alright, Iru, I get it. The earth is flat. Just imagine it.
But I haven't even set the price yet. What are you going to buy from me?
Is that just a way of speaking?
Ah, okay, no, because you're a teacher. Okay, well, I'll shake your hand here.
I'm not a flat earther yet.
But the
Point is the following. Let's suppose I believe everything you tell me. The earth is flat. We've been deceived, but why? What's the reason? I can tell you. Why did they bring down the towers? Because then, did they use that to justify an invasion?
why?
Did they lie to us in 2020? Because they wanted to experiment with human DNA through ribonucleic acid technology with mass inoculation, which they did afterwards. It could be argued it was a large-scale psychological experiment to see how much people buy in without.
Questioning.
Do things make sense? Why this huge deception? Why, Iru?
Well, look, I like that. While you were talking to me, I was obviously looking here to see if the one from the people behind this deception, which I always like to show. I don't know if the one about the Jesuits is here, but the reason I like to divide it, not this reason why. Generally, just like there's not only one truth, there's also not just one reason, because it depends on where you stand. If you stand in the why do they deceive us economically, I have examples, but it's really just about checking the official numbers. And you say there's someone here who's taking a lot of money, without having to prove absolutely anything, pretty much just the construction of the equipment and the launch show. They take a lot financially, and there's a reason.
But in all these deceptions, in the deceptions I firmly and 100% believe in, I don't feel it. And this is already a feeling. While the economic issue is important, I believe this is primarily a spiritual war.
That's why I tell you, I stand up. In the economic paradigm, it makes sense because it follows the money trail and the funds moving with the space illusion. If you go to the... Since we've already mentioned natural resources and the earth is flat, we should consider the closed circuit. From where? Free energy, exceeding limits, Antarctica's resources, and so on. But the most important thing is when you say the Twin Towers, for example, they brought them down to justify later an invasion and a conquest of territory in the whole area of Afghanistan. Because there's also opium there, and a lot of things that have to do not only with oil. It wasn't just a matter of oil, even in religious matters. There's an issue that is very well understood today with Trump's presidency, with the topic of the Third Temple and all that. Here, what they conquered in you is your brain, your mind, and your heart. Have they conquered them with the Copernican doctrine? When you ask me why, it's simple to understand. But since we live in a society that is already atheistically materialized, and when I say atheistically materialized, I don't mean it in standard religious terms, because you told me off the air that you're Catholic. Alright, but today's youth, for the most part, are no longer religious, and neither are adults. Many adults have drifted away from religion because they saw in religious institutions, not in religious faith, but in the institutions themselves, that there is deception, lying, stealing, that in some way the sacred word is corrupted. We agree on that, right? That same church, specifically the Roman Apostolic Catholic Church, is the same one that I believe in. Not only, as is often mentioned in that Council of Nicaea, where books, the apocryphal ones, were left out when compiling the Bible. You know, books were intentionally left out on certain topics, right?
About the Gospels, there's a pretty clear and obvious explanation.
Historical.
But if you're referring to ancient books like the Book of Enoch, they have been left out.
That by their own decision, by the decision of a group of human beings who got together, no one received a message from the Holy Spirit or anything like that. A group with power made an arbitrary decision declaring this is what will be read, period. I'm not saying whether it's right or wrong. I'm saying that same institution, over time as time went by, is the same institution that made the decision. It decided what story should be told on a religious level, and it decided what story should be told on a scientific level. When we talk about a spherical Earth, people think that the idea of a spherical Earth is something modern, part of the modern scientific paradigm. And they actually don't know that. The history of the spherical Earth creates it. The Jesuit order, which belongs to the scientific and military branch of the Vatican, starts with Copernicus, without making a single observation of the sky. This is official. Just by performing mathematical calculations, even using others' material at the astronomical calculation level. He puts forward the idea that the Earth is actually not the center of the universe, but rather the center of the universe. Back then, the Sun had circular orbits, and Earth was just one of thousands of planets. Exoplanets weren't discussed at the time. Giordano Bruno said that, but let's consider it just another planet among those we observe, like Venus, Mercury, Saturn, Jupiter, etc. Copernicus proposed it, so it's called the Copernican doctrine. Then comes Galileo, and Galileo starts trying to answer certain things that Copernicus couldn't answer. And the myth that Galileo was condemned by the church, that's a false myth that the church itself constantly denies. This was even reported in the newspaper El País. Only Cardinal Bellarmino accused Galileo. And he didn't accuse him for his scientific theories, he accused him for his hermetic mindset regarding the laws, if you will, of Hermeticism, the Equivalion, the 7 laws of the universe. This issue wasn't scientific but spiritual. Since Galileo was well protected by the Curia and close to the Pope, he was never condemned, quite the opposite. Galileo was the first director of the Pontifical Vatican University, which still exists and has the most Nobel Prizes in science worldwide. The claim that Galileo was condemned for saying it moves is a lie, yet these lies are now completely officialized. Okay? So, the church, when you ask why the church has always been in charge of control over the people, control over the population, to always keep you dependent on the outside, or you need someone from outside to come help you with this, with that, with the other thing. That same church created the spherical Earth, which seems to be in opposition to the theory, let's say, of the Catholic faith. In reality, they're seeking control. They don't care about faith. They can change faith. In fact, what they're doing, they have no problem changing it. These people, see, these are my principles. If you don't like them, I have others. That's the famous phrase. Look up the word Jesuit in the dictionary. The etymology of Jesuit, it says, belonging to the Society of Jesus or hypocrite and deceiver. That's how it literally appears. It says that, and what a coincidence. The Jesuit order is the one that carries out all that scientific part of the spherical Earth, even concluding with the Big Bang theory, which was proposed by Father George Lemaitre from 1927 to 1929. And the Big Bang theory was also proposed by the Jesuit order. That's right. So, when you ask me why, I can give it to you as an idol, Landucci, because... But generally, if you know who killed that person, what are you going to ask the father? Why did they kill my son? If the killer is present, ask them first.
Because here, there's something that really contradicts what you're telling me with the observable reality. Don't you realize what's under constant attack by these circles, by the entertainment industry, by the music industry, and seeing your level of awareness? And I imagine you're fully aware that there's a constant attack on religion, on the figure of Jesus. We agree on that, right? In the Judeo-Christian part of the world, yes, constantly. There's a widely accepted narrative that science has pushed people away from Catholicism. There's really a narrative ingrained in people's minds and in their masses, which is that the Catholic Church has always been an obstacle to scientific progress. What I'm telling you is a lie.
In fact, the father of the scientific method is Francis Bacon, who belonged to the church. Thomas Aquinas also proposed and discussed the scientific method in another form, and he too belonged to the church. That's one of the things I say. All from the church. Georges Lemaitre, Athanasius Kircher, Maximilian Angel.
So why has this system, which the church has greatly benefited from many scientific advances,
Advances or deceptions. I'm saying this because there's just one word. N.
because that confrontation, if they had, according to your point of view,
Things. I think
that here I'm talking about assumptions, not
I'm talking about realities for the
audience, according to the assumption you're giving me, the church is responsible for the heliocentric model.
It's not just my opinion, it's historical. Look it up there. And why?
With a system that has been created by the church to deceive people, dedicate itself to destroying the church? That's my question for you.
Well, for that in particular, you really have to get into the history, and this is a very interesting story which goes like this. Do you know the story of the Templars? More or less?
Yes, there are many theories and things that
Are true. Well, neither of us lived in that time, but let's go to the stories. Do you know that the Templars were in some way a mercenary group that worked for the church during the time of the pilgrimages
it was a congregation,
of the Catholic Church of that time, of
warrior priests whose goal was to safeguard the secrets of Jerusalem.
exactly, since the church sends them to Jerusalem and to oversee the whole journey. Because, of course, Jesus is all good with the Roman Empire, but Jesus wasn't Roman. And we have the churches in Europe, but supposedly Jesus wasn't. No.
The churches aren't only in Europe, there are the Coptic Christians.
Yes, but I'm talking to you about the time of the Templars. In the time of the Templars, we have the headquarters here, but actually this guy was born in another world, in another country, in Jerusalem. We are with the company of Jesus, but Jesus was born elsewhere. Some people wanted to visit that place for this reason, pilgrimage. So, the Templars, everything was wild back then, or so they say. I'm giving the short version. The Templars, warrior priests, had the mission not only to guard that route for those who wanted to make a pilgrimage there, but also to protect them in the Holy Land. Obviously, there are many Templar orders, not just one. There are many Templar orders that emerged over time and so on. But at one point, obviously, you know that banking, let's say in some way the beginning of fractional banking and checks, that's what the Templars were. Because you could leave your wealth in a certain place and travel free of all that, in case you were robbed along the way. And you, with some papers, would go to a Templar headquarters and they would give you the equivalent amount of money, and all of that is Templar. That's how it is. That's official.
I thought it mainly concerned the Rothschilds, but okay.
No.
The Rothschilds didn't even exist at that time.
No, but I understood it was made.
Much later, regarding maritime law and gold.
That was being transported. That's an upgrade, or let's put it that way. But the principle of banking is Templar. That's even made official at a certain point. Centuries passed, and I could say yes. The Templars became very powerful. That is, from the perspective of the monarchy and the church, they became very, very powerful. And they said, hey, hold on. These guys keep getting more followers, more wealth, more land, and so on, and so on, and so on. So then difficulties start arising in the Holy Land, where the Templars are losing a lot of resources, both wealth and military power, to the point that they end up being expelled. They lose the Holy Land, and the Templars are expelled by the Ottoman Empire, by the Turks, outside the 1,000-Year War and its history. And they have to return, and they go back to Europe when they return to Europe. Then comes the famous betrayal on Friday the 13th of Jacques de Molay, where Philip the Fair, together with the Pope at that time, make an agreement and say, listen to me. Do you owe the Templars a lot? Yes, me too. Alright, these officials. Yes, well, why don't we just get rid of them, do a raid in France and kill them all, lock them up and kill them? And that's what was done. On Friday the 13th, the famous curse of Friday the 13th, it's not because of a horror movie, it's because supposedly on Friday the 13th of 1300 and something, I don't know exactly when, it's the day they sent Jacques de Molay, who was the supreme commander of the Templars, to the stake. While the guy is at the stake, he says, this guy is the word, and he points at him. At first, you're not going to live more than 2 months, and well, you're going to live more than a month. And because of what ended up happening, that father died and Felipe, the handsome, also died. You may wonder, why is it going so far back? Because when this happens, when the House of the Templars happens, that kind of witch hunt, there is a group of Templars. Obviously, in some way, they protect themselves with their own power. They end up staying, they distribute land to the church and so on, and they make a deal, they come to an arrangement. And there's a group of Templars who have to go into exile, and many of them go to Scotland. And in Scotland, they create the famous Freemasonry with a single purpose: to destroy the church from within. Not so much the Christian faith, but particularly the church, because the church betrayed them. The monarchy betrayed them and sent them to die. That Freemasonry that was formed in Scotland, that's why you've probably heard many times that within Freemasonry, the most practiced rite is the Scottish rite. It comes from there. They planned that. And that's when, well, to destroy something so powerful, what you have to do is infiltrate it.
Right.
Well, you can, and that's what...
I always say that the church is infiltrated.
So, suddenly some really crazy things happen in the story, like supposedly a soldier who was in some wars that I don't remember, the famous Ignatius of Loyola, founder of the Jesuit order, arrives. Saint Ignatius of Loyola. He's now Saint Ignatius of Loyola, but back then he was just Ignatius of Loyola. He ends up in Montserrat with a knee injury, and there's also a Scottish rite that involves kneeling on the injured knee, etc. He ends up going to Montserrat and ends up being welcomed in Montserrat. The nuns save him. The guy says he was once delirious from pain, but I don't know what else. And he saw, and the Virgin appeared to him, and the Virgin brought him a message, and I don't know what else. That's where he found it. The Jesuit order began with Ignacio de Loyola, where he created what are the Jesuit instructions, let's say the more positive ones, not the ones about chastity and prayer, etc., etc. I'm not an expert in their religious practices, but they are well known. Then certain families started to get involved with Ignacio de Loyola. This later has to do with history. It has to do with the famous Venetian black nobility. But the Jesuit order was the order that infiltrated the church. That's why the spherical earth, even though it may seem contradictory, is an element of destruction of the Christian faith. Due to the Jesuit order, which was the Templar order that was betrayed. Do you realize that in Catholic history there has never been a Jesuit pope? Unfortunately, so far, since the compatriot was born in the same area, not compatriot, he is, but born in the same territory.
You don't see those born in your territory as compatriots?
What did Francisco fight for as a homeland if he became a Jesuit in the Vatican State and has no homeland?
I agree with you.
He does have a homeland. Like other chosen peoples, their homeland is wherever the money and people are. That's what makes them the chosen people. Because kings were believed chosen by God. They don't have a homeland. They're not compatriots either. The point is that the best tool for infiltrating and destroying the Christian faith is the spherical earth. It was done by the order, which was betrayed, but it worked out for them. Unfortunately, nowadays, when you talk about all these people who are being led away from a faith, even though I don't advocate for Catholicism, the instrument is perfectly understandable. If you ask why people don't believe in God, they rarely mention Jesus.
Science is usually what they mention.
Because of science, but one that opposes nature and divinity. It's a science claiming we're evolved monkeys on a flying rock in an expanding universe without purpose and just one among billions of worlds. And did you believe that story? They altered your beliefs, you'll never experience it, and you gave them your power. Do you think that the software? You say we are gods, creators, that we are gods, we are generators, organizers, and destroyers based on our beliefs, your creation software. I mean, because Linux, Mac, Windows, I create a program, Adobe Photoshop, I create it based on the initial operating system. If the original operating system lacks certain tools, I can't create Photoshop without them. You as a human being, don't forget that a human being is not simply an animal. We have three categories. The animal category could be identified as the basic principles of survival in the world in which we are incarnated. But then there's the properly human aspect. The human, meaning a person of color, has all the chakra colors, hues of the color wheel, hence human. And your mission is to transcend and elevate yourself to divinity. We are multidimensional beings. We have the power to create consciousness. We visualize this. We receive information from dreams and so on and so on and so on. Does that destroy or take away the spherical earth from you? And if you give your belief to that worldview, have you entered a limiting system? You think you're an evolved monkey on a rock and that you'll create your worldview and world? In relation to that software, they forced on you since you were 5 years old in an educational system. In an educational system that, what a coincidence, you know very well that the educational system is also a system based on the Jesuit order. It's the Prussian education system, developed when Jesuits helped organize Prussia's army for the wars they carried out there. So the Jesuits are involved in science, in education, in health, in religion, in Freemasonry, in politics. And that's what we try to expose or make people understand. That's the power that the spherical earth has against the flat earth.
Earlier you mentioned a chosen people, right? Shouldn't we mention it? What is the relationship between Freemasonry, the Jesuits, and the chosen people?
Well, according to...
Let's speak a bit in code. I think everyone who's watching us understands perfectly what we're saying here. I have many doubts. I understand you, but something still doesn't add up for me. In other words, the church is blowing itself up from the inside. It is
blowing itself up by a specific order. Maybe you don't know about this, but it's on a historical level. The Jesuits were the most expelled order worldwide, removed from nearly every place.
And
the people
chosen from 110 countries.
But the Jesuits more? I don't think so. Even by constitution, even in the Swiss constitution, and look, Switzerland is a super Templar country. They once said, no, stop. Here in Spain and also in Argentina, the Jesuits were expelled. This dates back to the Paraguayan reductions. The Jesuits have been expelled repeatedly. Yeah, and don't forget that in Napoleon's time, when the French Revolution took place, it had as an obligation, because they kidnapped the Pope, that they had to restore the Jesuit order in the church. Beyond the French Revolution led by the Jacobins, influenced by Freemasonry and other factors, with that phrase of law as well of equality, fraternity, and liberty. At that moment, the French Revolution is exploited, the Pope is kidnapped, and a clear demand is made for the Pope's return alive. The Catholic Church had to restore the Jesuit order, starting the final infiltration that still continues today. The Jesuit order had even been expelled from the church itself, the Jesuit order. Imagine what those guys were like, expelled from the very system.
Control. And what links them to those expelled from 110 countries?
I think there's simply a kind of communion, if you will, like a mafia. I mean, they're two different things, two different groups, if you will, but they realized that by joining forces, they had more power.
And common goals?
And goals in. One of the main common goals that both of them have is to return to the Holy Land. One of them has it because he has the idea. It's about the third temple and that the Messiah won't come until the third temple is rebuilt in Jerusalem. Obviously, where is the Al-Aqsa Mosque? Donald Trump has been awarded the Siros Medal. And can they look for the third temple? This is official. I'm not sharing anything new. Then they are in a current moment, a present where there have never been so many presidents of important places openly linked with Zionism, like Milley, like Trump. Was Bolsonaro in Brazil at the time? But well, not now. There's Georgia Maloney. Is Steve Bannon behind all of this, more or less orchestrating all of it? Yes, this Zionist, right, is a Zionist right nowadays. Just like the left is not conservative, everything is Zionist. And having the Zionist left as well, everything is Zionist, exactly. What people don't know is that Zionism belonging to the religion of the star, let's put it that way. Christian Zionism predates other forms of Zionism. People don't know that when we talk about Zionism, we're not just talking about the Star of David. There is Christian Zionism, which is older than the Zionism of the Star of David. So when you start studying history, you realize that the relationship is actually political, especially in mystical terms. In mystical terms, many beliefs are shared between what is Kabbalah and what is, if you will, the system of Christian Gnosticism. There are some relationships that they don't teach you in church. Don't expect them to teach you Gnostic mysticism in the Catholic Church. Yeah, not at all. For you, in the Catholic Church, you are considered a sheep and you have a shepherd, and the shepherd has another one. Higher up, there's another one, and even higher up, another one. Maybe in the world of Judaism, Kabbalah is taught more to their own people, and nowadays Kabbalah is opening up a bit more to the rest of the world. Obviously, probably with some reservations. That's not true. Teaching someone who belongs is different from teaching someone who doesn't by birth. That's always been the case. So, are political issues shared, like Zionism, both Christian and Jewish? There you have a lot of things that go directly to power and control the governments of the world. Freemasonry assists them, obviously. Freemasonry is everywhere, I believe.
Freemasonry is a loyal servant of the financial system, let's say.
Financial and political, both. It's a necessary tool. Freemasonry is a necessary tool of power and control. Because Zionism can't enter openly, but Freemasonry can. Today, it's completely normalized to have Masonic presidents, Masonic politicians, Masonic congressmen, and so on and so forth. When they start talking about Zionism, alarms go off and they start trying to distract your attention. The Jesuit order also shares this. It's interesting. They share a unique kind of knowledge about control that few people know their own version. Have you heard of the Protocols of Zion? There's a book
That's equivalent to it.
It's called The Secret Monica, which is the Jesuit instruction book for infiltrating politics, nobility, and monarchies. And universities? Why do you think most presidents study at universities? Let's put it this way. Most Catholic schools like Georgetown in the United States, for example.
All of them.
Those are Jesuits. Or about Opus Dei in Argentina, Chile, and Uruguay, which owns many universities and is a powerful church branch. Ultimately, when you go to they share history, the Jesuits and the guys from the Star share common historical ties against Catholicism. Jews known as Marranos were expelled and forced to convert. How long were they persecuted? The church persecuted not only the Templars but others as well. Now you have two people saying, if the enemy is your enemy's enemy, he's also my enemy. So they also share a common enemy,
which is the Catholic Church. So to go back to the topic of the flat earth, this whole heliocentric concept, in your opinion, is it designed to undermine the spiritual foundations of the being?
Human being completely? That's the only thing that matters. That's it. There's no other justification. I mean, the scientific version, I repeat, of a flat earth versus a spherical earth, when you look at the verifiable earthly arguments, the only thing they have is an observation of a ship disappearing in the distance, seen by a Greek who has already been refuted, and this has happened many times with technology and observations. And that's what we invite you to do, because that's the main axiom of the spherical earth. It's the curvature on Earth, not in the sky. I know, not whether man reached the moon, and not about satellites, not about the solar eclipse or the lunar eclipse. The flat Earth model also explains all of that. Not just the heliocentric model. No, so Vinto, when you realize that at a scientific level, it's relatively simple nowadays in modern times, not in ancient times, because back then not everyone was educated or had time to question things. They all served the monarchy, the nobility, and others. Nowadays, we have a certain freedom to somehow focus and concentrate on topics that we like. After overcoming the scientific barrier, you wonder why. First, you ask yourself, who is he? You might wonder how they pulled off the deception. We'll get the documents so you can see how.
And let's discuss that, since it's the most complicated part. Because you see the heliocentric model, and they have a good marketing. They have good marketing. No, good marketing, right? Numbers, physical calculations. I mean, it's everything. And I'll say it. I'm a flat earther too. The whole show is so well done. It's scary. And actually, I think people aren't ready to see that truth on a massive scale. Because it's too precise, too subtle, too much.
It's just too much. If you enter the mathematical world, the same calculations used for complex problems are also used in astrology. In fact, that's how it started, how everything related to the sky began. It started to be noticed statistically. Back in Sumeria, they were already predicting eclipses. For example, the Babylonians, without assuming that the Earth was a sphere, were already calculating eclipses. The Saros cycle, National Aeronautics and Space Administration itself, on its official website, says that they based their eclipse predictions on the Saros cycle created by the Babylonians. The only improvement is that we now know the location. That's it. They are the same calculations the Babylonians made 2,800 years ago. There is nothing new under the sun. What is new under the sun? It's that human beings created within mathematical models a lot of things that have nothing to do with the shape of the Earth. So the whole theory
of strings, wormholes, black holes, everything that the theory of relativity, everything,
all of that
is a lie.
No, it's not a lie. First, that has nothing to do with the shape of the Earth. We repeat, to know if the Earth is curved. And you don't rely on a wormhole, nor do you rely on the theory of relativity. You rely on observing the Earth, which you have right there every day. And making an observation of the horizon, nothing else matters. The rest is just creating patches to try to cover up the primary observation, which is the horizon. What is the theory of relativity? They make the theory of relativity seem complicated with calculations and equations. But within what Einstein proposes, the theory of relativity, it's beyond how light behaves and more. Is it because it can't be proven that gravity is a force? That was my last
question. For you, doesn't the idea of gravitational force fall apart when discussing flat Earth?
No, because objects still fall. But why do they fall?
Yes, but planetary gravity doesn't make us rotate. Saturn, Jupiter, and the other planets exist.
All of that exists. Let me put it in a way you'll understand. When Newton proposed the theory of gravitational attraction, what we actually refer to as the Big G, Isaac Newton himself wrote about it in his own handwritten letters. You can get into the University of Cambridge. It's called projectnewton.co.uk, and it contains all the original handwritten writings of Isaac Newton. When he presents the theory of gravity, he writes to a colleague, Bert Lee. He writes him a letter saying that no educated person is going to believe it. It would be stupid, in fact, to think that one body is going to attract another body just by having mass without any intermediary agent. That's what Isaac Newton proposes. Can you imagine that? With Isaac Newton, he proposes that. That theory wasn't known yet, at least not in Europe. Electrostatics and magnetism weren't being developed. He understood magnetism as it related to the phenomenon hadn't been studied and electricity was still unknown. You could see it in a lightning bolt, etc., but you didn't have the study that came later with Maxwell, with Gauss, with Faraday, and everything else. When Newton proposes it without an intermediary, he means I can't. Because this object has mass and this one has mass, this necessarily has to attract. There has to be something here. This can't be empty. There has to be some intermediary agent. That intermediary agent, it's the ether, known since ancient times as the great substance that permeates everything, which is invisible to the eyes, undetectable to instruments. Let's say this measurement scientist, but it's there. I don't want to go deeply into the topic of the ether scientist, but it's there. Today, they try to disguise it as dark energy, dark matter, which is also undetectable, but it has to be there. Well, etc., when Newton brings that up. He didn't know about electromagnetic phenomena, as we know them today, but objects did not attract each other, but rather fell in a vertical line and accelerated at a speed that we know as 98 meters per second squared. That is verifiable. The reason for that could be electromagnetism as well. It doesn't necessarily have to be because the Earth is spherical with a core that attracts everything toward the center. Clouds don't fall even though they weigh tons because they float due to an electric charge. For example, if I want to make something levitate right now, I can't do it with an anti-gravity machine, but I can do it with electricity, or I can do it with magnetism, and I can control it and so on. When I look at the planets follow exactly the same orbits at the same speeds with the same orbital periods. Since humans first recorded them in Sumeria, they've never attracted each other, changed places, or lost speed. It's as if there's no loss of energy, as if thermodynamics doesn't work in outer space. So, since it couldn't be proven that gravity was a force, no matter how much they teach you in school that it's a force, it can't be proven to be a force. Then the theory of relativity comes along and suggests that maybe outer space is empty. Albert Einstein initially believed in the ether, but later discarded the idea. But he says, well, space is empty, completely empty. And what we understand as gravity, we actually have to imagine it as if it's a fabric, like a fabric of time and space, which is a shamanic concept. That is the great mesh, the mesh that is the great illusion. When we are in an illusion, people think that the mesh, the great illusion, is no, because this doesn't exist, this is all fake, right? What he did in reference to the mesh is time. Time is what doesn't exist, time doesn't exist. Master, can anyone grasp a moment of time? That's the great illusion. Time doesn't exist. Time is relative only in relation to the experiences we have. It doesn't exist. That's the great illusion. Time doesn't exist. But in physics, Albert Einstein says there is the great Maya, the great fabric of time and space. And a massive object like a planet or a star. It sinks the great illusion. He's telling you right to your face. It sinks the fabric of space-time. How does it sink? Like if I sink the armchair. Everything nearby starts to fall perpetually around that sinking lump. And that's what is called gravitational attraction nowadays. Barbaro. It's a good theory, it's a good approach, it's a very metaphysical approach. In fact, Albert Einstein always had assistants who helped him with the equations. Now we're going to demonstrate that in the field of reality. I can bend time and space, but you can't bend love. I can say that I attracted that girl because I actually bent the love between her and me. And then it's fine. It's poetically beautiful. You can't bend something that lacks matter. Time and space can't be bent because they don't exist as things. For something to exist, a particle is needed. Since nothing changes, everything we see in the universe and sky has been there since humans began recording it. We have the same constellations, the same blue sky, the same stars for 6,000 years. Supposedly the universe is expanding. And boom, then the patches start to appear. And then the inflationary universe theory comes up. He says, the universe is expanding, but if everything expands equally and simultaneously, it seems like nothing is expanding for us. They say if Earth spins and is round, planes still fly as if it's still. Are you realizing they're joking with you? With no impact on your real life? There isn't going to be a wormhole that nobody is going to come and eat you. There isn't a supermassive black hole that's going to swallow you up. A meteorite won't fall and you aren't going to Mars or the moon. They're going to keep you going for 60 years with that carrot. They'll keep draining your taxes, but they're also going to drain your spirit. That's the most important part. The rest is just a fantasy. It's like discussing Narnia and creating a mathematical model to decide if the lion can talk. Mathematically, he can, but that doesn't mean he exists. Black holes aren't real. If you saw the picture they showed, you'd laugh. I don't know if you remember. It looked like that donut. Red, it was like an orange donut, all out of focus. Supposedly, I don't know how many telescopes on Earth focused together and generated a database of 138,000 terabytes. They showed you that and it was the same. Are you serious? Didn't Albert Einstein's theory just get confirmed that there's a supermassive black hole that exists? 134,000 light years away. Relax.
And speaking of National Aeronautics and Space Administration, National Aeronautics and Space Administration, I've seen several videos in which, in what they themselves publish, a small technical glitch has slipped by. And you can see mistakes that they're in a studio. In fact, even the band itself, which has nothing, no kind of evidence, the band Red Hot Chili Peppers in the song
of Khaled. Well, it's interesting. It's
interesting, yes, because
that's there.
That's where Enrique comes in with his negative primate.
Yes, of course. Space may be the final frontier, but it's made in a Hollywood basement. Exactly. Totally. I mean, really, there's actually a song where they say you can't even mention the word Adreno. Do you know it? Adreno? Yes, that one.
You can't mention that either.
Yeah, you can't mention that one. Yeah, you can't mention it. In that same song, Californication, it has a lot of messages, but a lot of very, very, very important messages. That's one of them. Space might be the final frontier, but what you're showing me was made in a Hollywood basement. Wow, I mean, let's remember Hollywood means the sacred forest, and the Jesuit order was the one who created Hollywood later on.
Not there. And why not? Those were from our friends of the chosen people.
No, the chosen people have the concession and creation. The first movies that are made in Hollywood are for teaching people that Indians needed elimination. The first movies are about cowboys. And it's the first form of propaganda for
Justifying the actual massacre.
was carried out by the Anglo-Saxon peoples. And there are the Jesuits. Look it up, because that information is,
History, Hollywood, and music. What about me?
you can look up is. Next is the concession to friends, who are Talmudic and have no reservations. They don't have to give explanations to corrupt societies. Basically, they don't care about anything, and if you read the Talmud, you'll realize it, basically. And that's Hollywood. Basically, it's the Talmud in Belgium.
I'll check the Hollywood Jesuits thing. You
I'll send it to you. I'll send you the information.
send me all of this because I'm
freaking out. In fact, you must have heard of Jorge Guerra. Jorge Guerra, he's a Canarian from here in Spain who is one of the, for me at least, one of the best. He has exposed and explains all the Zionist infiltration and the Venetian black nobility, specifically regarding the infiltration in major societies.
We're planning a program with him. Can you share his contact info?
Yes, of course, he's awesome. The guy is not a flat earther or anything, but he's awesome. But I'm really interested. He doesn't know that much, really. I'm telling you, if he comes, I think here,
It's a space where you feel comfortable, even during confrontations.
in a certain way. No, I'm not saying it'll blow your mind. Jorge Guerra presented all this about the Jesuit order that I'm telling you about. In the beginning, before it was called Hollywood, obviously it wasn't called Hollywood in the 1800s, they start with everything. I'll give you a concrete fact. The inventor of the projector, what we know today as a projector, is named Athanasius Kircher, who belonged to the Jesuit order. Search Google for Athanasius Kircher. He created what was called the magic lantern. It's the first projector in history, which, as Wikipedia shows, was made to project drawings of demons on the walls to torment the parishioners. Basically, that's why they control cinema. That's why they control that whole part. The best paintings and artists in the Sistine Chapel, the Vatican hired them because there was no Hollywood then, but people needed to believe it existed. An angel meant to describe heaven instead shows you photorealistic hell. Today, this is its form. This is exactly the same as when an angel was painted. This doesn't exist. This doesn't exist in reality, but it exists in your mental visualization. And if you see it and believe it, inside you basically have a sphere, and this is National Aeronautics and Space Administration. National Aeronautics and Space Administration is Hollywood. That's why there are the astronaut horrors, which, well, if you want, I'll tell you about them soon. Go ahead, tell me about them now, perfectly. Look, there's a particular case because you mentioned the astronauts and we begged them to include it, and incredibly, the research team did include it. In the sixth one, which wasn't like what happened on Channel 4, which was live, but rather it was post-produced and so on. And obviously, they make you look like you're missing a few players in the head. But they showed a video specifically that's one of those unforgivable mistakes because, it's not like that. The famous saying goes, if you lie to me once, it's your shame. If you lie to me twice and I believe you, it's mine. When dealing with a space agency that repeatedly lies to you the same way, not just once, but several times, if you keep believing, well, that's on you. Somehow they've turned you into a true believer who will never question anything. There are many mistakes by National Aeronautics and Space Administration that they've been caught on. When, for example, they do a spacewalk and air bubbles escape, air bubbles. Why? Why is that? Is it just a coincidence? They train in underwater pools, where they have a replica of the International Space Station itself for training. However, when you see them on a mission against that black background, you never see objects or situations you can identify in real time. That's how they're passing by here, because down there you can see the Amazon fire or the blackout in Madrid in real time. Not exactly, they were never passing by there at that moment, they show it 3 days later. Well, and so on and so on. However, there's this one case in which, and look, I really respect what National Aeronautics and Space Administration does in terms of audiovisuals, because it's not like they make mistakes every day. There are things that are really, really well done, but they're not in real time. They have a format that's post-produced, like a movie, where they give you a 20-minute tour inside the International Space Station. I don't know, but that's not real time. When it's real time, It's what you see in the news reports of astronauts interacting on Earth, where they're arranged in a straight line next to each other. Sometimes there are four, sometimes two, and they're just there, right? As if they were levitating, floating in free fall and zero gravity. They're speaking to a journalist on the ground. There's one where I'll send you the video so you can play it while I'm narrating it to you, which is for me. And that's the key to that whole show, which is there are four astronauts finishing up talking on the ground. This is still publicly uploaded on the American Public Broadcasting Service channel, which is public broadcasting. This system is a free channel where the journalist tells the astronauts, well, since you're in space, why don't you say goodbye by doing a spin? Carnero no is to prove they're in zero gravity. Since they apparently need to, it seems people don't believe them. You need to prove you're not suspended by wires, but actually in a free environment. That's when you see a choreography that looks great. I'm explaining it quickly, but you can still understand it. That's where you start to go up with your arm tucked in like this because the wires come out from your waist. It's a system that David Copperfield created. It's patented by David Copperfield at National Aeronautics and Space Administration. It's called the Argo system. So you quickly leave the scene so you don't complicate things for the other three. Tuck your arm in, do this like Superman, and go up, leave the scene. The other three begin spinning, but since the space is small, they quickly get tangled up with each other. When they start getting tangled up, you start to see that there's one who's all the way in the back. Does he realize that his two teammates got tangled up? So he helps one of them by spinning him to get untangled, and you see the astronaut doing this. He starts spinning and suddenly stretches out his arms as if to unhook the cable he has inside, and that one is relatively saved. But there's one left, Scott Kelly, who ends up completely flipped over. He's the bald one. He gets flipped over and stuck. He gets stuck. So the one at the very back looks at the camera, raises his hand, waves like this, as if saying, I realized he's stuck, I'm gonna help him out. And he approaches the wall, a hidden wall that's there, and with his hand he presses a button. Unfortunately for them, astronauts always have only one microphone, which they turn off to pass it from one to another. The microphone is off, he grabs it, the other astronaut turns it on and speaks, but the bald guy who gets stuck leaves it on. So when this guy waves his hand, and he approaches the wall, touches the button, and you can hear the button. The button clicks. And not only does the button click, but you can also hear a motor above. What does it do? And when it makes that sound, the astronaut's suit goes. It lifts up like this to 90 degrees. And his suit lifts up. And what's more, the cable scratches him and the guy starts scratching where the cable passed by. So when you see the water bubbles, when you see the Argo system, you see a guy who realizes he's stuck. He presses the button, the motor sounds, and his clothes rise to 90 degrees, unrelated to gravity. It's happened to him several times, not just once. In that instance, they left the microphone on. For much less than that, you would question a politician. For much less, people questioned videos showing politicians together with one asking, now we have to put on the mask, right? And everyone would put on their mask. They're lying and you see it but act like you don't. What are you defending? Making the earth spherical didn't feed you daily and you're a YouTuber? I understand regular people, but I don't get what they're defending or why not being spherical bothers them so much. Don't they realize the potential they'd gain by changing their mindset, their creative software? National Aeronautics and Space Administration has made many mistakes. Could we do a special program? This one about the moon landing, the falsehoods, all those mistakes from the time of 69 to 72, with all those missions where the little Masons went to the moon. So National Aeronautics and Space Administration is full of mistakes, and in the end, National Aeronautics and Space Administration is the ultimate authority. Because like you're not going to experience the spherical Earth. If the one showing you that outer space exists is a fraudulent agency, well, you have to start questioning it at least, right?
Want to do a moon landing debunking show here?
I'd love to. It's one of my favorite things because I work in visual effects.
We'll do it. We need to have the television here, and I have to prepare it very well. Iru? We should start wrapping up the show because it's lunchtime and all that, and honestly, we always have an exclusive segment And people always ask questions to the guest. The members of my community always ask questions to the guest. With Iru, we've made a stronger agreement. So I tell my community members that there won't be an exclusive section, but there will be a live stream for the community where Iru will answer everything.
The questions. A lot
better. We've only done this with Rescue You, a community member, and now with Iru. I'm going to leave the community link in the pinned comment. We should wrap up this program now. We've agreed to do a specific one about the moon landing. Iru, you all already know that there's an exclusive section in my private community where you can ask questions to the guests through the chat. This time, I've made a stronger agreement with Iru. And you're going to be able to have an exclusive live session with him and me where you'll be able to ask all the questions you have. The live session will be on the last Sunday of July. Gentlemen, that's all for today. Iru, do you want to send a message to the audience?
Yes, well, first of all, thank you. I want to thank you for inviting me. It's clearly already on the agenda in a positive way. It's cultural, not just a fad or trend. This is a serious issue. And as you look into it, you see where it leads. I think it brings us to a positive issue of empowerment. And to reconnect a bit with creation, with the cosmos, and with our very purpose for what we are doing in this incarnation. I'm grateful because not everyone discusses this topic. On the other hand, let me, simply because we have some friends from the channel Flippy Flop who, in this idea of spreading the word, this kind of topics, they've made their second documentary called Reality, where many important people from different fields participate. But it's a documentary that, if anyone here wants, they can scan the QR code. I'll leave it here on the screen, and later I'll send it to you properly. It's a serious documentary that questions reality and whether we truly know or believe what it is, focusing on essential questions. And here, biologists participate, people related to sociology, people from the scientific field. I am there too, along with others, addressing this important worldview aspect, which is good. I participate, am close friends with the creators, and they've approached it very seriously. It's a channel that maybe doesn't get the exposure it deserves. So that's why I took the liberty of recommending it to everyone who's interested in these topics. And as for the other thing, my channel is LA Factoria. So anything at all for those who are curious and want, if you will, to dive deeper into these topics. My channel is available there. But the challenge of the debate remains, maybe even the one on the plane. If you prefer, we can start with an exclusive live stream for your community and address questions from interested members there.
If I get the debate, we'll do it first. But already,
I'm telling you,
given what we've seen, I don't understand why they don't want to confront you. Honestly, I'm still not completely convinced, but I am leaving with a new perspective. I'm going to look into it more deeply.
Into this and not see it
as a thing. Simply crazy?
It's not crazy. If it were, they wouldn't be here. Look.
You've come very prepared. I'm not going to lie to you, nor do I want to lie to my audience, nor do I want to come across as someone who tries to please everyone. That's not my style. And honestly, you've made me rethink some things. Or you do a great job sharing your beliefs, right? And what I keep insisting on, what makes me distrustful, is that no one confronts you in a debate.
I hope you can get one of these science communicators, especially so it can have a good impact and also to set an example, to show us an example, whether it's a nautical engineer or
someone who works in...
An astronaut won't come, but the closest thing, if you will, anyone from the...
A scientist who supports the heliocentric model works for me.
Be someone famous, because the...
Famous people won't risk their credibility.
That would be good anyway, huh?
All right, gentlemen, leave the last Sunday of July with Iru Landucci. The link is in the private community, actually in the pinned comment. Gentlemen, it's been a pleasure. See you next time. Thank you, Iru.
For coming.
See you next time, gentlemen.